Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. So today we're going to continue the knife steels that I work in series. I think we've got 3 more. Today's going to be on 52-100, and then I might go ahead and shoot the other 2 videos today and then just post them, because I usually like to post videos Saturday mornings. So today it's going to be the 52-100 high carbon steel, and then we've still got 1095 and 15N20 pattern welded steel, and then various steels, the miscellaneous, bits and pieces, memory steel, stuff like that. And I've already done 1095 high carbon, 440C stainless, and 5160. So today it's going to be on 52-100. Now 52-100 is a pretty incredible steel. Okay, it's the steel that I go to when I need the most performance, is kind of all around. Okay, it's got excellent edge retention, it's got excellent toughness as long as you heat treat it right with a differential hardening. It's got pretty low corrosion resistance, but it does have a little bit more than 1095 does. It's got a little bit of chromium in there. Now the downsides to it are that the 52-100 that I use, okay, I get it from 3 different places. Okay, I've got some from my buddy Ed Fowler. Ed Fowler's a big reason why I use 52-100. That stuff is 2-inch or larger diameter round stock. Okay, Jantz is selling some really good 52-100 now. This is inch and a quarter-ish. Yeah, something like that, inch and a quarter-ish. This is not on, it's on their website, but it's not on the blade steel section. It's in the round steel section. Their website lately has been kind of quirky a little bit. They used to have a really good website, but now lately it's not what it used to be. Their products are still great. The steels that I'm getting from are still great. They're just websites, just a little bit on the quirky side. So anyway, so Ed Fowler, Jantz Knife Making Supply, and then McMaster Carr sells some really good 52-100 also. I like their stuff in 1-inch diameter or larger. And I suppose we can go into that with forging and 52-100 and flat stock 52-100. Okay, so I started, it'll just be a long kind of convoluted type story. So I started working 52-100 when I learned about my now friend Ed Fowler. When I started reading his books, okay, so even a little bit farther back, so you guys have read The $50 Knife Shop by Wayne Goddard, right? Okay, Wayne Goddard was a really good knife maker. I never held any of his knives. I never got to meet him, never got to talk to him on the phone, or even interact with him on, any of the knife forums or anything like that. I was a little bit too late, or he was a little bit too early, one way or another. But Wayne Goddard, and especially in his book, The $50 Knife Shop, really kind of set the stage for me as far as, how I like to work. As a beginning knife maker, there are expenses like you can't imagine. Everything costs more and more and more money. Wayne was a big guy for building your own equipment, servicing your own equipment, and just kind of making do. Going to the salvage yard, thrift sales, pawn shops, just, stretching that knife making dollar just as far as you could. And so that was kind of the philosophy that, that I took, as a beginning knife maker. Well, in Wayne Goddard's books, he talked about this guy by the name of Ed Fowler. So, and Ed Fowler and 52-100. You can't say Ed Fowler without saying 52-100, and you can't say 52-100 without saying Ed Fowler. The two just kind of go together. So, now, at the time, Ed Fowler was using 52-100 ball bearings. I mean, big old things, that he was getting out of a salvage yard in Casper, if I remember right. Casper is a big oil town, lots of oil drilling and stuff. And I think later on he found out that those 52-100 bearings were coming from somewhere else, and they were, a pretty common item in salvage yards around there, and so that's what he was working with. Later, Ed started working with 52100 from known sources, and he met a friend of his, Rex. I don't remember Rex's last name. I've never met Rex. Rex is a metallurgist, and I can't remember where Rex works either. It was some big steel yard or somewhere or other. Anyway, so Ed and Rex was, a metallurgist, but he also, really enjoyed knives. And so the two of them hit it off, and Rex had a lab and Ed didn't. And so, they worked back and forth considerably, to come up with his heat treat for 52100. If you haven't ever studied on Ed Fowler, boy, if you want to spend 3 or 4 days on the internet, go right ahead. So anyway, so I got Ed's books and I read them, and I thought, man, this guy's talking about doing stuff with knives that, just completely blew my mind. I mean, just as kind of an overall type package. Now, a little bit of backstory on Ed. Ed is a rancher up in Riverton. Okay, Riverton is not quite the middle of nowhere, but it's only about 30 or 40 miles from there. So he's a rancher that lives pretty much in the middle of nowhere up in Riverton. Riverton, all of Wyoming has got some pretty harsh climate, but Riverton especially gets quite a bit of it. And he's also a rancher. So you guys know ranchers, they're out in the field taking care of their cattle or their sheep or whatever it is that they run, year round. So Ed lived a much rougher lifestyle than I think the majority of us will, even the majority of us here in Wyoming, just from being a rancher out in the middle of nowhere with that kind of weather. So what Ed was after was a high-performance knife that would basically do everything, okay? Now, his idea of a normal knife is my idea of a pretty hard-use knife, okay? The type of knife that you can pry and dig and, just cut and just do whatever it is that you need done with. The knife that will not fail ever, no matter what. You can't bend it with your hand. Just a pretty extreme sort of knife. So my wife and I went up to Thermopolis, which is a town not too far from Riverton, and they've got amazing hot springs there, and she really likes the hot springs. And so we went up there for an anniversary, if I remember right. And she had said that Ed would, she said maybe we should stop by and visit Ed. And so we did. I emailed him, he sent me his address, and then we stopped by, and man, it was instant. Friend I'd never met before. So talking with him and visiting and, going up several times to visit with him was a big reason why I started working 52100. Now, 52100 comes in two flavors, or at least it does for me, with my where I was in the timeline of steels and knife making. And 52100. When I started working 52100, you could not get 52100 in flat stock. Okay, you could get 52100 in round bar, and that was it. As far as I know, they didn't even sell it in flat stock or sheet stock or anything like that. 52100 was straight up a forging steel. If you did not forge, you could not work in 52100 unless you had a friend of yours that would forge some down for you so that you could, just grind a knife out of it. So now at the time when I started working with it, I did not have a power hammer. I hadn't built my power hammer yet. So I was pretty limited as to what I could work just by hand with a 4-pound hammer on an anvil. And boy, I wore myself out plenty working, tried working 1-inch round bar by hand, and at the time I just wasn't a good enough smith. I didn't have the heat control down to be able to give 1-inch 52100 round bar what it needed to perform, and that's lower temperature forging cycles. So I did get to working with some 5/8-inch round bar from McMaster Carr. And boy, that stuff just blew me away. It was small enough I could forge it by hand. Excuse me a second. It was small enough that I could forge it by hand. It wasn't too expensive. It was a little bit on the shipping costs, because I think it was coming out of California. But anyway, I could work with this stuff and work with it well and give it what it needed, that smaller diameter. Once I built the power hammer, I stepped up to 1-inch round bar from McMaster-Carr. There's quite a bit of difference in performance in between knives forged from 5/8 round bar and knives forged from 1-inch round bar. I mean, I'm not going to say it's twice as much or even half again as much, but it's a considerable difference. So Ed had been talking about, I mean, if you get his videos and you read his books, he talks about rate of reduction, and Ed's kind of an extreme guy, so he found some 6-inch round bar 52-100 from Rex, and he was working that down on his 200-pound Beaudry. That's a power hammer. And getting extreme rates of reduction. All right, my power hammer is only like a 50 or 60-pound power hammer or something like that, so I can't work with that 6-inch round bar type stuff. But I did notice the big difference in between 5/8-inch round bar and 1-inch round bar. Not so much of a difference between 1-inch and 2-inch round bar, but there still was a difference. So that kind of led me to kind of going down that whole rate of reduction path, you know, and thinking that Ed was, you know, pretty much right in what he was talking about. Now, a little bit later, somebody came up with some 52-100 flat stock, all right? Now, it was 52-100 that had been milled or, you know, rolled out at the mill into flat stock and into sheet stock. So I thought, hey, great, this is it, because now I can order that stuff and then I can do a little bit of forging, you know, forge a point on it, forge the tang out on it, and, you know, thin out the profiles a little bit and then grind it, and I'll be able to save quite a bit of time working with that flat stock over the round stock, and I'll be able to, you know, either make a bigger profit with my knives at a 52-100 or reduce the cost because I'd have less time into them. At first, it kind of seemed like it was working okay. I was working, you know, with the 1/4-inch by 1 mostly, and then one day I decided, you know, I better do I was doing a cut test. I got a new coil of manila rope. You know, they come in like, well, it's over there, but the rope I got came in big old spools like this, and I think I've cut through like 3 of them. You take a coil of rope and then you cut like 1/8 inch of it off at a time, you know, to test for edge retention. Well, I've been working with this 1/4-inch stuff for, a couple of months or so, and I thought, you know, everything was going really good. Well, then I went and I grabbed one of my my blades that I'd forged out of 1-inch stock, and man, it blew that flat stock knife completely out of the water. I mean, like half again as many cuts as what that other stuff was doing. So then I started really doing some more tests and found out that, hey, that flat stock stuff was not cutting anywhere near like the stuff, you know, I was making out of this, you know, round bar type stuff. Since then, I found that, and I did a little bit more digging, and when I kind of finally came to the conclusion that flat stock 52-100 was not near the same animal as that, I used up the last of that flat stock 52-100, making the insert bars for my blade holder for like when I do handles. So this here is a jig that it's got 2 bars of 52-100 flat stock, and they're lined with leather. And then you take a knife and then you put it in between those jaws, and then you tighten these things down, and you put this in the vise, and then you use that to work the handle. That is what I think that flat stock 52-100, that's the place for that stuff. Okay, that stuff has got, at least back then, has got no, no business for me. I mean, I'm not going to go back to it at all. Maybe they've made some advances in it. Maybe you got folks that are milling out good 52-100 now. But as long as I can still get, good clean 52-100 from Ed, Jantz, or McMaster-Carr, then I'm not going to work in that flat stock stuff. So now, so that's kind of the whole history between me and 52-100 and Ed, and flat stock 52-100 versus round stock 52-100, the good suppliers. Now, some examples one example of stuff that 52-100 will do This is one of my my personal hunters. Okay, this was my hunter for like 5 or 6 years, something like that. And it's made out of the 1-inch McMaster Carr 52-100. We got a clean leather style pouch sheath, with the little cutout, and it's got the 3 rivets holding the belt loop in the back. This one right here has got a matching ferro rod that used for fire starting. It's got a Bolivian rosewood handle. Back when I was doing 2 brass pins, brass guard and red and black linen micarta spacer. 1 year, you guys know I hunt a lot, right? So 1 year, the edge retention crowd was getting extremely rough on, the internet. And so now you guys know that I really enjoy edge retention, but it's not the end all be all of, the measure of a knife. For me, the measure of a knife is balance, right? But somebody was talking about having to, being able to make it through a couple of deer without having to sharpen their knife. Well, I'm not like that. I take my knife out, hunting. If I dress 1 deer out, then I come home, I touch the knife up on a stone, and then I put it back in the sheath and put it back with my pack. That way, the next time I bring it out, that knife is nice and fresh, right? Same way with my hunting rifle. I take my hunting rifle out, I make a shot with it, I bring it home, I clean it, I oil it, I put it back in the safe, and then that way it's ready to go for the next time. You don't hear people bragging about how many shots they can take with their hunting rifle before it needs cleaned and and that's the measure of success of a hunting rifle, right? Anyway, so that year I decided I'm just going to go ahead and sharpen my knife up before the season starts. And I'm going to go the whole season, if I can, without sharpening it. Or, count how many animals I have to do before I have to sharpen it. Drove me bonkers, okay? So when I got home after, harvesting an animal, I cleaned it up. I palm stropped it just to make sure I got all the fat and the crap out of the edge, and then, washed it, dried it, put it in a sheath, and waited to go hunting again. I want to say this knife, for certain now, my boy and I got 2 whitetails with it, 2 white-tailed does. He was too young to hunt. I got both the does and dressed them both out with this. I want to say there was at least 1 elk, and I might have helped a buddy out with another one. My daughter was hunting at that time, which means that I probably dressed out my mule deer and her mule deer. And then she was going antelope hunting with me at the time, so I probably went through 2 antelope also. So that's 2 whitetail, that's 2 mule deer, that's 2 antelope, and 1 elk. And then I want to say that year was also a turkey, and I want to say I traded for a sheep or a pig from a buddy of mine also. So it was a considerable amount of hunting, and not once did I touch that edge up, throughout the season. And then at the end of the season, it would still take hair off my arm, but it wasn't taking it cleanly. Now, I'll never do that again. I mean, that just drove me absolute bonkers, not touching the edge up on my knife. I guess it's just, a thing in my head. Use it, touch the edge up, put it away, so it's good for the next time. But it did do it. Now also, that wasn't my first go around. I've been hunting pretty serious now since I was like, 22, 23, something like that. And so, I know how to dress an animal out and keep a good edge. You cut from inside the skin, not through the fur, so you keep the rocks away from the edge and the sand and the grit and all that kind of stuff. You don't cut through bone, you cut through joints, or you cut through growth plates. Things like that. But that knife still made it an entire hunting season for me without touching that edge up. And that's the kind of thing that 52-100 excels at. It also patinas pretty nicely. Now, of course, that one, you can tell I used it quite a bit. And it's still my backup hunting knife because that's just a really nice hunting knife. So again, 52-100. Excellent edge retention. Excellent toughness as long as you do a differential hardening on it. Great all-around steel. It will patina and show different colors as it patinas. The downsides of it are you got to forge it. There's no way around it. You got to forge it to get that kind of performance out of it. The heat treat, I use Ed Fowler's heat treat, and it's a multiple quench, a multiple temper, and pretty strict heat cycles on the way to your heat treating. Heat cycles that begin all the way back in forging. You gotta give it what it needs to be able to get that kind of performance out of it, and that takes time, and it takes experience, and it takes dedication to it. And all that kind of stuff costs money, which is why my 52100 costs more than my 1095 or 440C, anything like that. The knives that 52100 makes good out of is hunting knives. They make great, a blade for your 940. Neck knives, straight razors. It works good in choppers too, but it's kind of hard to justify the cost of that steel and that heat treat for a chopper over like 5160, which 5160 you do need to forge, but the heat treat isn't near as long or as involved as in 52100. So again, 52100 is one of my favorite steels, and I really thank my buddy Ed Fowler for helping me learn about that and everything. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.